before we begin,
I want to tell you a story, not the story from the book, not the story of Dominic and Aria, but the story behind why this book exists and why this podcast had to be made.
Because the art between us didn't start as a novel. It didn't start as a project.
It didn't even start as an idea. It started as a feeling, a quiet one, a feeling I carried for years without knowing how to name it. You know that kind of quiet, the kind that sits behind your ribs, the kind that follows you into grows louder the longer you ignore it. That's where this story began. I wrote this book because I needed to understand myself. I needed to understand the echoes I was carrying, the ones I inherited, the ones I created, the ones I tried to outrun.
And somewhere along the way,
those echoes became characters. Dominic,
Aria. Two people who feel real to me because they come from real places inside me.
Dominic is the part of me that learned to survive by staying quiet. The part that held everything in. The part that didn't know how to ask for help. The part that believed silence was safer than truth. Aria is the part of the world that sees you even when you're hiding. The part that listens between the lines. The part that feels the truth before you say it. The part that reminds you that healing doesn't happen alone. And me, I'm somewhere in the middle, trying to understand both sides, trying to bridge the distance between who we were and who we're becoming. This podcast, What Quiet Says, is the space where all of that comes together, where the book, the music, the psychology, and the emotional journey all meet. If you've read the book, you'll recognize the themes. If you haven't, don't worry. This podcast will guide you through the emotional landscape, chapter by chapter. But before we get to the story,
before we get to Dominic and Aria,
I want to talk about the journey you're about to take with us.
Because this isn't just a story about love, it's a story about healing, about trauma,
about silence, about the echoes we carry from childhood into adulthood, about the patterns we repeat without realizing why, about the moments that break us and the moments that rebuild us. It's about the art we make out of our pain, the art we make out of our longing, the art we make out of the spaces between us. When I wrote The Art Between Us, I didn't know I was writing a map of how two people find their way back to themselves and eventually to each other. Dominic's journey is one of learning to feel again, learning to trust again, learning to speak again.
Aria's journey is one of learning to be seen, learning to stand in her truth, learning to love without losing herself. And your journey, ahead of the listener, is whatever you bring with you, your own echoes, your own quiet, your own healing.
This podcast is not just a companion to the book, it's an expansion of it, a deeper dive into the psychology, the emotions, the music, and the meaning behind every chapter. And today, we begin at the beginning. Before Dominic speaks, before Aria enters, before the story unfolds, I want you to hear something, the quiet before the echo.
Because that's where everything starts.
Dominic, if you're ready, tell them who you are. I'm the echo you tried to ignore, but I never left. And that right there is where our story begins. This is What Quiet Says. This is chapter 1. This is the moment before everything starts to change.